Welcome to the Explainer. Let's jump right into the totally fascinating and honestly highly ironic history behind the very first decision ever handed down by the United States Supreme Court. When we think of the highest court in the land, we usually picture these monumental civil rights rulings or massive shifts in federal law. But the reality of their actual first ruling, well, it's a story that perfectly captures the messy, complicated reality of building a nation literally from scratch. Part 1. The first Supreme Court case, expectation versus reality. So if I asked you to guess what that very first case was about, you'd probably assume it was some sweeping, dramatic constitutional declaration, right? Maybe an epic clash of the founding fathers. So what exactly was this first U.S. Supreme Court decision, and why do so few people actually know about it? Well, instead of a grand constitutional showdown, the reality was kind of a letdown. It was an anti-climactic procedural dismissal over a farm mortgage technicality. Yeah, no First Amendment debates, no interstate commerce, just a messy dispute over debt, depreciated paper money, and, of all things, a clerical error. Part 2. A war hero in debt, the protagonist, William West. To really wrap our heads around how this happened, we've got to meet the man at the center of it all. And let me tell you, William West had a seriously impressive resume. The guy served as a militia general during the Revolutionary War, actually defending against British warships. Later, he even became a judge on Rhode Island's state Supreme Court. But tragically, his story arc ends with him losing his farm in 1791 and dying in poverty by 1816. So, how does a war hero and a respected judge end up hitting rock bottom? Well, West's downfall didn't start on a battlefield. It actually began with a totally disastrous molasses deal way back in 1763. This single bad business venture strapped him with a massive, lingering mortgage owed to a prominent local family, the Jenks. And for over 2 decades, West managed to make partial payments, but he just couldn't shake that principal debt. It was like an albatross around his neck. Part 3. The paper money crisis. Rhode Island's economic chaos. You see, after the Revolution, there was practically zero silver or gold currency left in circulation. Farmers were losing their lands left and right to forced sales. So, to combat this severe economic crisis, the state legislature enacted a pretty radical statute in 1786. They basically printed 100,000 pounds in paper money and forced creditors to accept it as legal tender. Whether they wanted to or not, they had to take it. But as we know, economic reality tends to hit hard, right? Within months, the value of this new paper money just completely tanked. Check this out. In July of 1786, 6 silver shillings were worth 9 paper shillings. By January, you needed 24 paper shillings. By April, it took a whopping 34 paper shillings to equal the value of just 6 silver ones. I mean, the currency was rapidly becoming completely worthless. And as you'd expect, these laws caused absolute commercial stagnation. Merchants literally closed their shops. Trade just ground to a halt. But William West, he saw a lifeline here. He attempted to use this highly depreciated state paper money to finally wipe out his decades-old molasses mortgage, basically lodging the paper bills with a state judge under that new law. Part 4. Journey to the High Court, Navigating the Judiciary Act. So the heir to the mortgage, an attorney named David Leonard Barnes, flat out refused this worthless paper money. Naturally, he sued in the brand new U.S. Circuit Court for Rhode Island, and he won a foreclosure judgment against West. To fight this, West had to appeal to the highest court in the land. And to do that, he needed a specific legal document called a writ of error. It's essentially just an executive instrument used to move a case from an inferior court up to an appellate court for review. Sounds simple enough, right? Wrong. The brand new Judiciary Act of 1789 turned this basic requirement into an absolute logistical nightmare. Step 1, you lose in circuit court. Step 2, procure your writ. But step 3, West had a strict 10-day statutory window to get this writ issued exclusively from the Supreme Court clerk's office. And at the time, the court was sitting in Philadelphia, which meant an impossible 200-mile journey. I mean, just look at the math here. You've got 200 miles between Rhode Island and Philadelphia, you've got a 10-day deadline that completely excludes Sundays, and your only travel options in 1791 are horses or coastal boats. Because of the sheer physical impossibility of making that trip in time, West's legal team did what any practical person would do. They just had the local Rhode Island Circuit Court clerk sign and seal the document instead, figuring the Supreme Court would surely understand the predicament. Part 5. Defeated by a technicality. The climax of West versus Barnes. So fast forward to August 1791. West's attorney, William Bradford, presents this locally signed writ to the Supreme Court in Philly, but Barnes immediately objects to its validity. He argued it came from the wrong clerk's office. Which brings us to this crucial, incredibly dry sentence from the court. Writs of error can regularly issue only from the clerk's office of this court. Basically, because a piece of paper was signed in Rhode Island instead of Philadelphia, the appeal was completely dead on arrival. On August 3, 1791, the justices issued a unanimous per curiam, which just means an unsigned collective dismissal. They absolutely refused to hear the underlying arguments about the farm mortgage, the molasses debt, or the paper money crisis. They prioritized strict procedural form, strictly adhering to the exact letter of the new Judiciary Act over the actual substantive merits of the case. Part 6. The case's lasting legacy, tragedy, and precedent. Now, while that might seem like a wildly petty bureaucratic technicality to us today, this decision established a profound precedent for the young United States. It firmly centralized federal judicial power, making sure lower courts couldn't just, invent their own rules. It insulated federal review from state-level interference, which was absolutely vital for a fragile new republic. Oh, and realizing how insanely unfair that 10-day rule was to distant citizens, it prompted Congress to pass the Process Act of 1792, which legally allowed circuit clerks to issue these writs moving forward. Sadly, that legislative fix came just a little too late for our Revolutionary War hero. Because his appeal was dismissed on a technicality, the lower court's foreclosure stood. William West lost his farm, was eventually forced into debtor's prison, and died in relative poverty. It's a stark human cost to the building of early American legal infrastructure. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to ponder today. When a rigid, procedural technicality completely ruins an individual's life, but simultaneously builds the vital, stable foundation of a nation's legal system, does the system actually serve justice? It's a heavy question, and it's one the courts have wrestled with ever since that very first decision in 1791. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the rules.